Hello my fellow crafters and welcome to Inspiration for Cards. Today I'm going to be making a really simple and clean card using just one color of oxide and a stencil. So this is the card we're going to make. And as I said, just one color and a stencil. Now, as usual, I will list all the products that I've used below in the description bar, or I'll link to my blog where I have written everything out in detail. And if you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, please consider to do so, because that will really help me grow this channel and make fun videos for you for the future. So please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notified when I have a new video up. Now, without any further ado, let's dive in and make a card. Have fun! So in this video we are going to be making a one-layer card with just one color of ink. The background, that is, and I'm going to use black to stamp, or white, sorry, to stamp the sentiment. The sentiment I'm going to use is from Elizabeth Craft Design. Now here I'm making a couple of strips from masking paper, or for masking tape. I've stuck the masking tape onto a piece of scrap paper, just simple plain copy paper, and I'm going to make strips of about 1 centimeter wide. And I'm going to use these to mask off the edge of my card. As I said, this is going to be a one-layer card, so that means there's not going to be any matting done in this one. But I do want to create the illusion of being a matte, of there being a matte, so that's why I'm using the masking tape to mask off 1 centimeter around the edge. Now that's done, I will take my stencil to see if it fits, if it covers the area that I want it to cover, and I will look for the area that I'm going to use. I'm going to stick it down using some masking tape, from Post-it tape in this case. And then the next step is we're going to blend. We're going to blend the background with just one color of purple. Now for this I'm going to use Seedless Preserve, a beautiful deep rich color. It's the normal ink, and the normal inks do tend to blend a bit harder. Now I'm using a blending brush here, and this makes it easier to blend, but still it can be a bit blotchy. Now in this case, that's really not terrible. It will not affect the end result because we're going over it with the stencil. But yeah, it looks a bit blotchy, but that's not a bad thing in this case. If you really want a solid background, the oxide inks are easier, or just keep blending. But in this case, I was happy with it. Now I'm spraying it with a bit of water to make sure that I get a nice even blend on the backside. That really helps, and that's the beauty of these distress inks, that they are water reactive and you get some nice effects as well from the drops on it. Here I'm using my heat tool to dry, and then I'm ready to put on the stencil and go for it. Really put on another layer of the same color purple. So I'm not changing color, I'm using the same color purple, using the same blending tool, the same blending brush, and going over the areas to intensify the color in those areas. And here you see, because you're layering the color, they become more intense. The dye inks, the normal distress ink, is a transparent ink, but if you layer them, the color gets more intense while you go. So that's what I'm doing here, going over the whole stencil, blending, and intensifying the color through the holes in the stencil. And of course the tape helps to keep the stencil in place, but also I'm holding it because I really don't want it to shift. I want to keep the clear and crisp lines from blending through these holes in the stencil. Now when I'm done, it's time for the reveal, and look at this. I love working with stencils. It gives such a nice impact on your work. And this video is about just one color. In the next video, I will be playing with two colors, but with the same kind of technique, but using two colors, blending through the stencil, and for the background for that matter. Now here I took off the masking tape, and look at this, a really nice fake border around the background. Now I smudged a bit on the fold of the card, so I'm using my sand eraser to get rid of that. It works really well. Next, I'm taking my Misti and I'm putting in the card plus the sentiment. And this big happy birthday sentiment is effectively all this card needs. And I'm going to stamp it directly on the panel, which means it's going to be a true one-layer card, which is always good for postage, because I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but in the Netherlands, we can only send 20 grams with one stamp, and having two makes it a bit more expensive. However, if you put a lot of love and effort into a card, that really doesn't matter. But yeah, in this case, it's just a one-layer card. So I'm closing the door of my Misti, picking up the stamps, and then I'm gonna condition that a bit with my fingers because it's a new stamp. I haven't used it before and they can be a bit sticky. And then I'm gonna use my white ink to stamp. But before I do that, I will put some embossing magic on there to make sure it's not static, my prints are not on there, and also that ink, if it isn't 100% dry, that will help as well. So here you see me use the Hero Arts Unicorn White pigment ink to stamp on the front of the card, and I will stamp many times until I am happy with the result, because yeah, the white will blend a bit with the purple, making it a bit pink looking. So I will stamp again and again until I'm happy, and then I will add the embossing powder to it. But this is why I love stamping tools, because if you don't get it right the first time, you can just restamp, 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 as long as you keep your card in the same position. Now I'm adding the Wow White embossing powder. It's a fine embossing powder, so it will stick to the letters nicely without being too bulky. I will tap it off, put it back into the container, and then I will heat set that embossing powder, or melt the embossing powder rather. Now, despite the fact that I used this anti-static powder and let the card dry in between, it still stuck to some parts of the card that I wasn't too happy with. But I have this very cheap but nice and sparkly angled brush, and that will help me to get the embossing powder off the ink where I don't want it before I heat set it. Now that's all done, I'm gonna melt the embossing powder. But I'm really not happy with the intensity of the white here. Despite the fact that it's an opaque embossing powder, the purple is still showing through. So, as I said, I will restamp, and that's the beauty of it as well. I left the stamps on the Misti tool, and I will put my card in the same position, and I will just stamp over the melted embossing powder. Yes, you can do that. You can stamp over the melted embossing powder, and using the anti-static powder again, and I will use the same ink again to get a more opaque white impression. Really inking that stamp up, making sure the card is in the same position, and stamp again. There we go, that's a lot better. And now I'm applying the embossing powder again. And now the ink was dry enough as well, so I didn't have to do all that repair work, and I'm melting the embossing ink. And here you can see a much clearer, brighter impression of that happy birthday sentiment. Yeah, I'm a lot happier with how this turned out. Next, I thought it could use a bit of embellishments, so I'm gonna use the glossy accents. Now, this looks a bit milky when you put it on, but these dots dry really clear, as you will see in the picture at the end. And this completes this beautiful, simple technique. It's a very simple technique, but quite impactful. And it's a lot of fun to do. If you need a quick card, this is the way to go. Now this is the completed card, and as I mentioned, the next video I will do the same technique again, but expand on the technique a bit more, make it a bit more elaborate. But I do hope you like this card, and if you do, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you the next time. Thank you!